Welcome to another edition of Journey of Hope. Stories of people that have been impacted by the healing ministry of Loma University Medical Center. People from around the world that have traveled here seeking hope and healing and wholeness. Our special guest today is Bob and Ruth Wheaton from Sedona, Arizona. They're going to share their journey, their story. Bob and Ruth, it's good to have you here. We've got people from around the world that are watching. And we wanted to hear about your journey and need to learn a little bit about your background, where you've been, what you've been doing, and what brought you here to Loma Linda. So we'll start with you. Where are you from?
Well, we are from Sedona, Arizona. We've lived there for the last 15 years since Bob and I both retired in 1995.
Okay.
And before that, we lived in the San Francisco Bay Area. San Carlos, to be exact.
Okay, now, where were you born and raised?
Oh.
Wait, we're talking about where you started.
All the way back.
Yeah.
I was born in Memphis, Tennessee, and grew up actually in St. Louis, Missouri.
Okay.
We met in college at Ottawa University in Kansas, and from there our lives took us to California.
All right, Bob, let's kind of start with you then. Tell us where you were born and then kind of go up through your education, because you're a chaplain, you're a pastor,
right?
Marriage, family,
and child
counselor, and cancer survivor.
Right.
So, all right, let's start. Where did you begin? Where are you
Well,
from?
I was born in a wheat field in Kansas.
Well, there's a big difference between Kansas and the wheat fields and Tennessee.
That's true.
Okay.
And so I went to grade school, high school in a small town in Kansas, and then went to Ottawa University and met Ruth.
Now, Ottawa is where?
It's southwest of Kansas City, about 40 miles.
Okay. And when you went to Ottawa to go to, that's Ottawa University or college?
College, really.
Okay.
It's called university, but it's basically
When
college.
you went there, what were your plans? I mean, what were you taking?
Well, I wanted to play football.
In Ottawa?
Yeah, and I wanted to play basketball, and I wanted to go out for track.
And so to do that, you had to go to college.
Right, you got it.
I got it, yeah.
Oh, and I wanted to meet a good woman to find a wife.
Okay.
And consequently, while I was doing that, I got an education.
And just as kind of a sideline.
Sideline.
There are some benefits.
Kept coming up, and there you are.
All
You know
right.
how that goes.
So what were you studying?
I was a political science.
Okay.
And I had a minor in, I was going to be a teacher. I thought I'd be a coach and a teacher. And then I was called to the ministry.
So you were always active in athletics then?
Yes,
and really, did they have quite an athletic program there?
Oh, yes.
A number of sports that you participated in?
Well, I participated in football and basketball and track.
And you were able to work out some study time?
Well, once in a while.
And what were you in school there for?
I was also there to become a teacher.
Were you?
Yes, and I had a double major in English and Spanish, and expected to be teaching.
All right. Well, he had a deeper agenda than just going to school there, I can see. So you planned on being a teacher. I mean, political science, what were you thinking of teaching?
Well, I thought I'd teach history and coach. I came from a small high school, and so when you're in a small high school in Kansas, why, if you're the coach, you've also got to teach a course or two. So
Sure.
I'd probably be teaching political science or history.
But you really wanted to be a coach, and then
Right.
the whatever other responsibilities were given to you.
Right.
But you said while you were there, you received a call to the ministry.
Right.
Okay. Tell us about that.
Well, the American Baptists have a conference ground up in Wisconsin called Green Lake.
Okay.
And I heard some tremendous men and women up there who preached the gospel and shared a kind of gospel I hadn't heard before, really.
Now, did you go up there and were listening to some meetings, or?
Oh, yeah, it was a youth conference.
Oh, you're at a youth. I know
At a
there's
youth
usually a
conference.
time when a conviction comes.
Right.
So you're in the youth conference, just going out there to participate and enjoy it.
Right.
But you sense this call.
Right. And I thought, boy, that's where I fit in. I wanted then to minister as I heard these great preachers preaching. I thought, you know, there's something I could do and I'd like to do.
So you had this call. Now, where was Ruth at this time?
She was in Cuba.
She was in Cuba. What were you doing in Cuba?
I was with the mission team, spending the summer there.
All
This
right.
was actually the year before the revolution took place.
I was going to
so
say,
we
my,
were
oh my.
we were still
You're
invited to come to.
pre-revolution.
Yes.
Okay. So you were over there for the summertime.
Yeah.
Now, were the two of you acquainted at this time?
Oh, yes,
And
we
had a-
were writing
had a
back
good
and forth. It
relationship?
was a
So
torrid relationship
a torrid
going on.
relationship, yeah.
Long distance.
Yeah, long distance.
Long
You're in
distance.
Cuba. And, I mean, did you go up just for a week for this youth retreat, or were you up there for a period of time?
Well, I was up there for a week, and then the university had hired me to go to different Christian camps to promote the university.
And recruit.
And recruit, but also to be a counselor in the camp.
Okay.
So I did that all summer. Went from Green Lake into Nebraska and Kansas and Colorado and
So the mail's going back and forth
Yes.
between Colorado and those other countries.
That's right.
And Cuba.
Cuba.
Okay. So then you come back, both of you come back at the end of the summer to your school year. Are we talking about junior, senior year at this point?
My junior year, Ruth senior.
My senior
Okay.
year.
And what happened then? Did you,
Well,
when did you get married?
When she came out and met me in Colorado, and that's when I popped the question. I couldn't wait any longer.
Are we going to go to school next year? No.
We went
Oh,
to
yes.
school all year,
Okay. So you popped the question,
and she said yes, thank goodness.
and then how long after that did you get married?
We were married the next June.
The week after I graduated.
Oh, good move. All right.
So
good
then-
move. Got to have some stability and an
Right.
income.
Yeah.
Okay, so she graduated, and then you finished up your senior year
And I also was a pastor of a church.
at the same time.
At
your
the
senior
same
year.
time, my senior year,
Okay.
there was a little church about 17 miles from the school, and so Ruth became a teacher in the school in that little town, and I became the pastor.
So you began your ministry together
That's
very
right.
early on.
Oh,
there.
right,
Well,
right.
that's great. And you already had this spiritual inclination and this leaning, and you're serving down there in Cuba as was that a student missionary type of thing?
It was a group of students.
Well, that's a wonderful, wonderful experience. So you graduate.
Right.
Now, what happens then?
Well,
Getting the degree is one thing, but you
Right.
already had a job.
and if you're going to go into ministry, you better go to seminary,
You
right?
better, yeah, that's often what happens.
That's what better happen, I
It better
think,
happen,
these
that's
days.
right. So where did you go then?
Well, then we thought about it, and I think my mother would say every once in a while, young man, go west, go west.
Okay.
Well, there happened to be an American Baptist seminary in Berkeley, California.
Boy, when I think of Berkeley and I think of those years,
Well, it was before that Berkeley.
before that Berkeley.
But
No, Berkeley's got some wonderful
well, it
things
did,
going
and
on.
it's a very exciting place, Lynn,
It
to
was.
live. We went from living in this little tiny town of 200 and had our own house and yard and the whole works, and we moved to California, went up into the third floor flat,
Oh, what?
looking out over all of Oakland and San Francisco.
Really?
What a
The Bay
beautiful,
Bridge.
Had a beautiful view.
Oh, couldn't beat it. And so we started seminary there.
Okay, so was that for a year or two?
Three years.
For 3 years.
Yeah.
Okay, so was that the equivalent of the what? Bachelor of Divinity at that
Well,
time?
it's a Master of Divinity.
Master of Divinity. Okay. And then, but you still, after you finish college, where are you going to go?
I mean, seminary.
I mean, seminary. Where are you going to go?
Well, then you have to find a church, or find a church that'll accept you, and a church
Now,
that
were you
accept.
working during this time?
I was. While
Professionally,
he
I
was
mean?
in seminary, no, I had my teaching certificate in Kansas. When I got to California, they told me that it was not acceptable. I had to get a California.
Where's Kansas? I
A
suppose.
California certificate, which means taking classes in California history and being a California
Yes,
teacher.
properly.
And we got there in May, and I said, that's going to take me another year. Meanwhile, I found a job at the University of California working for the president in his office, and I loved it. And I said, why should I go back to
No,
school?
wait a minute. When you say the president,
Now, this was President Sproul. This
but he
was
was
the
over the
old,
whole
the
thing,
whole
wasn't he?
thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
all over all of California.
Yes, that was in the old days.
I remember
when
that
there
name.
was one
Yeah.
president, not many, and I enjoyed it very much. And I thought, well, you know, I don't really have to teach because this job is very fulfilling and it's got an income, and so I'm happy
Well,
with
that
it.
should have been a very, I mean, there were so many things going on. I mean, you're looking at all of California, all
Yeah.
the California schools. Wow, what a training that
It was an exciting job because my job was in preparing the president for the Board of Regents meetings. So when he had the agenda, I had to make sure he had everything, all the documentation that he prepare him for the meetings.
In order, properly, and correctly.
Betcha.
Wow, that's a
It was fun.
tremendous responsibility
It
for
was.
something like that. So, when you're finished with your 3 years, did you do any pastoring during this period of time?
Well, when you're in seminary, you have to have practical
Sure.
work. And so I had practical work in 2 different churches, and that was a good experience. And I often say I learned maybe more from those 2 pastors than I did in anything else. Of course, they wasn't academic, but
They
how
were
do
very
you
practical.
work with people, and how do you organize your church, and you know, and they were both terrific in all of those aspects.
Well, you were sharing with me while we were together that you discovered some very exciting things in your early ministry. And why don't you tell us about how you raised up a church?
All right. Well, you have to find a church, you know, or a church that'll accept
At least
you.
a nucleus.
A nucleus. And so I was called to start a new church in Menlo Park, California.
Okay.
And the pastor of the church that was kind of sponsoring our church did a lot in psychology, and he had small groups that they called Yokefellow groups. You may have heard of Yokefellow groups,
Okay.
Elton Trueblood and
Yeah.
some of that. He started these small groups. Well,
Nucleus is meeting in a home.
well, right, but in the church, you
Yeah.
know, all the different people in the
Sure.
church. And so that sounded really good to me, and that's one of the reasons I felt called to Menlo Park, because I could work with this pastor and learn from him. And we had a small group of pastors, you know, where we took psychological tests.
That were in the seminary at the same time?
No, these were
These were
pastors
out in the field.
out in the field,
Okay.
and in fact, most of them were satellite churches of this mother church. And so all of us pastors got together once a week, which was a wonderful experience, as you can imagine.
Sure.
And we shared, and you know, our highlights and our lowlights,
Sure.
and helped each other. And so part of this training was that everyone took psychological tests, MMPI and others, and each week you would get slips on your personality, who you are, and very often the one you said, that's not me.
Kind of a profile, but
Right,
the
that's not me,
test
but
didn't
when you
lie.
started working, you realize that is me, you know. And so each week, as we go around the circle, and as each of us would talk about who we were and how we felt about ourselves, and then we would ask each person to offer up a prayer, a certain prayer for us. So we prayed for
Based upon what had been revealed?
right, and we prayed for each other every day. So
Not
then-
only during the meeting, but you were
Oh, yeah,
continually lifting people up in
right,
prayer. Okay.
each you know, all during the
Yeah.
week, every day you thought of your fellow pastors
And the particular issues.
and the issue that they
Right.
brought up, you know,
Wow.
that they would come up with. And so this church was started with a small group where we did these psychological tests, and we had about 12, 13 people, including Ruth and me, and
That wanted to be a part of a,
of
new
a church. Well, and the fact the mother church had people in our community, and so they would suggest, we want you to go to this church to help get it started. That's the way we started the churches. And
Started
so,
with little small groups. So how big would the church grow to?
well, when I was there, I was there about 3 years, and we had 125 members.
And started with just a small nucleus.
Right, and
building.
we had a building and property, which is something in Menlo Park to get that
Yeah.
much, you know.
Yeah, even then.
So yes, and what began to happen is these groups they were really evangelizing tools, because word of mouth would say,
Reaching out into the community.
right, people would say, go out and say, well, I'm in this group with this church, and you know, and they'd hear about it, and they'd say, well, can I be a part of it? You know how that works.
Word of mouth.
Word of
And
mouth
The
is-
personal testimony is really what it was.
That's
and
right.
They're sharing, and they got this exciting pastoral couple that they're meeting with. And
Well, we like to think that.
well, obviously it
Hey,
did.
We're starting a family at the same time, you
That's
know.
right. Oh, yeah. So it began to grow. Now, you started a counseling center about this time, somewhere along the line.
Yeah, I didn't start that till I moved to my second church.
Okay.
But I was doing a lot of counseling because these small groups would bring people in, and then they'd want to talk to me personally to talk about certain issues that they weren't willing to talk about in the group, or they wanted more time, because
Sure.
in a group you can't
Yeah.
take all this time, as you know. And so I started counseling. And so my counseling load got bigger and bigger.
And taking more and more of your time.
more and more of my time.
And even though it was pastoral related, you're still pastoring a church.
That's right.
So I'm sure there's some dynamics there. You had to make some decisions.
Well, that's right. You know, eventually I was working 70 and 80 hours a week, trying to do it all. But the problem is when you're a pastor, you know, people die or want to get married. They do these things.
And sometimes at inconvenient times.
And they want
you now.
they want the head honcho there, and I want to be there.
Sure.
But I've got a counseling appointment here with a person who is desperate as well.
And counting on seeing you.
Right, and they've got an appointment, and they're looking forward to this. So it actually got too much, Lynn.
Yeah, you can cancel somebody once, but when it starts happening on a regular basis, it just, it's
Well, and-
frustrating to you as to them, and
And it was I had two big jobs.
sure, full time.
Full-time jobs. And I have a family now, you know, they're
How many? I mean, so how many children did we finally end up?
4.
4. Okay, so you got a growing family, a growing ministry, a growing counseling business. So you made the decision to inform the church that you could no longer be their pastor, and you're going to be a full-time counselor.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So did you move out of the area?
No, we stayed in the area,
Different town.
different
But
town.
different-
I moved this counseling center to a
S-
private
somewhere,
office.
sure.
And we started a counseling center where we had, I think, 6 or 7 counselors at our zenith, where we had a psychologist.
Well, I've heard of
and-
growing a church, but now you're talking about growing a counseling center.
Well, yeah, we had a psychologist, two psychologists and 2 psychiatrists, and 3 marriage counselors.
Now, what were you doing at this time? Are you still working for the president?
Oh, no. That was in seminary.
I knew.
And now I'm busy having babies,
Okay.
and when they were old enough, I started working for the high school district as a library assistant. That was
And
back.
found that very fulfilling.
Well, yes, and that was in the days when California could afford those kinds of people in the schools, and
Yes.
so. But when our youngest child graduated from high school, I thought, now's the time for me to make a career change and do something different where I learn new skills, have a flexible schedule. And a job opened up at Sunset Magazine, and I decided to go to work for them. And
Sunset
I
Magazine.
cooked for them.
You were the cook for them.
I cooked.
Wow.
It was
so
fun.
some of the recipes that were showing up?
There are 2 kitchens at Sunset. One is an editorial kitchen. One is a hospitality kitchen.
Oh, and were you working in
And so
hospitality?
I was in hospitality. We were entertaining their corporate guests, and
Oh,
it
that
was
should have been an
wonderful.
exciting time,
I
too.
loved it. So
Well, so everything's going along fine. And some time ago, you went in for probably a routine physical, found out you had cancer.
Well, I got a physical every year, which
Normally-
everybody needs
Sure.
to do. And my PSA had been going up. And this last year went in, and it was up to 4.5. And it had been, I think, the year before, 3.5.
Okay, now for our listening audience, 4.5 is not all that high. But the significant point is yours went from a 3.5 to a 4.5
That's correct.
in a period of a year. And so that's cause to take a look at it.
Yeah, my GP said, okay, Bob, I want you to go and get a biopsy.
Okay?
And so he referred me to a urologist. I get the biopsy, and it's cancer.
Wow. So I want to know, how did that affect you?
well, with any other guy, it might have affected me greatly. But this is such a cool guy.
It was just
It
unflappable.
was like, well, yeah, I've got cancer. So now let's see, what do we do about
Need
this?
to go to the dentist and get
What do
my
we-
filling filled.
Let's go take care of this.
Just like that.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
that makes it a lot easier for you.
Oh, yes.
Now, had you had any cancer in the family?
Oh, my sister had breast cancer
Okay.
and died of it.
And died of it.
Yeah, and my grandmother had breast cancer and she died of it.
Okay.
And then I
So the
had-
family members that had cancer, they died from it.
They died from it, yeah.
But when you got it, you said, hey, I've got a problem. What am I going to do?
Well, you see, I'd done some research even before because I had a hunch that I better know about this. And
Yeah,
I had a
talk about it.
cousin who had prostate cancer.
Okay.
And he had it surgically removed, but it didn't end up very well.
Many times it does, but sometimes you
Well,
have some problems.
his was just a problem.
Sure.
And I thought, I don't want any slicing and dicing. I don't want, and he would agree with that, you know.
Sure.
So I thought, well, I'm going to check out. There's a cancer hospital in Phoenix, which is 125 miles from us. So I go to the internet and I look on that, and they list all the different treatments from surgery to radiation and
All the different
freeze
options.
dry and the
Sure.
whole works. And I thought, well, that looks pretty good. But I'd heard that Loma Linda had maybe something that I ought to look into. So I go on the internet and look, and I saw proton therapy and what that
What it meant.
meant. No slicing, no dicing.
No freezing.
Freezing, no freezing, none of that, you know. And I thought,
No
boy,
seating.
everything looks good. So I said to Ruth, I said, come and look at this. This looks pretty good. And she said, oh, that does look good, you know. So
Well, I remember asking you where God was in all of this, and then you went way back in your ministry, I think, and reminded me of somebody that you'd encountered that had something to do with Loma Linda.
yes, I had a client who got her nurse's training here. And you know, when you're you're doing counseling, you find out
Sure.
where people are coming from. And I said, Loma Linda, where's that? And she told me where it was. And I said, why did you go to Loma Linda? She was a strong Catholic.
Yeah.
Why did you go to Loma Linda? She said, because it's the best school in the country. So I'd heard about Loma
Early
Linda.
on, years
Early
ago.
on, yeah.
Years
That was
ago.
probably, when
Yeah.
I was still in the pastorate. And then we'd had a couple fellows in our church who had come here. And so I immediately contacted them and said, well, what about this proton therapy, this Loma Linda? I know you go there for 9 weeks. What happened? So they just became effusive about, oh,
About
Loma
their
Linda,
experience.
it's wonderful. You've got to go. If you got cancer, that's the thing to do. They treat you well. It's not just treating, the cancer. It's treating the whole person. All of the above. It's a spiritual place, Bob. And I thought, boy, the Lord's blessing me again.
What a wonderful way to look at it. God is always there. Jesus is always guiding and directing.
Mm-hmm.
But when we encounter difficulties along the way, sometimes we forget that God is in control. So God was blessing you by bringing all these different people
Right.
into your
You
life.
bet.
Absolutely.
So you made the decision to come here. Now,
Right.
just making the move to Loma Linda for 9 weeks it's a major move. So now tell me, how was your trip? I don't mean the driving over here, but while you were at Loma Linda, tell us about it, Ruth.
Oh, so much more than I ever expected it would be.
Really?
I thought we would come here and he would have a treatment and we would sit around and be bored, And in fact, I said when I get there, I'm going to go going to volunteer in the children's hospital or something.
Want to get involved?
I'm not going to sit in
Sit
an
around.
apartment for 9 weeks. And I did try to do that, but by the time I figured I did all the paperwork and got the references and did the police check
Yeah.
and the training.
The time would be gone.
And then they require 100 hours, and I said, there won't be 100 hours left. But I've not been bored, my goodness.
Time has gone by.
So much to see and do.
Yeah.
And everyone wants to come and visit us and see what this place is that we've been raving about in our emails and in our
So
letters.
tell me, Bob, what have you been doing during the 9 weeks while you were there?
Well, we both go to the Grayson Center
That's the
every day.
wellness facility.
Right.
Every day. you know.
Every day.
Every day we go.
Every day.
That's just a part of our routine, and we run a couple miles, lift the weights, and do
So
those
you're working
kind
out
of
there. I know you're golfing.
And I like to play golf, and then we've gone over here to Redlands, to the Redlands Bowl, and boy, they have some wonderful programs over there that we've enjoyed. And there's another theater that's up in Highlands Park, isn't it?
No, no.
And we went up there and bought season tickets for the plays up there. So we've enjoyed the plays.
You were actively involved the whole time. Now, we've got some people that are watching this program. Some of them began the week and it was a good week for them. But today, or the last couple of days, they just found out they had some very sobering news. Now, your cancer was, you acknowledged it, we're going to take care of it very quickly. Well, what would you tell the listening audience if they've encountered something? And we've just got a minute or so left here, but what would you tell them?
Well, I would tell them, number one, listen to your doctor, and if you found you've got cancer, you need to look at all the possibilities. What's right for you may not be right
Sure.
for me, and vice versa. But I kind of had a feeling about what I
Yeah.
wanted, and I didn't want to have invasive if I could help it, and so I would say, listen to your doctors, and certainly call Loma Linda. And one of the things when we called, beautiful voice on the phone, said we'll take care of you. She got the right information, told me exactly what to do, said I'll be your nurse.
Immediately put a face to the
Oh,
entire
right.
institution.
Goodness.
And of course, prayer is a very important
Right.
part of
Oh,
this.
gosh.
And as we're coming down to the end here, I just want to tell our listening audience that, no matter what's happened to you this last week, that God knows all about you. He's got a plan for your life. And as Bob and Ruth have indicated, as they saw the things happening, they were able to look and see how God was intervening, bringing people into their life. And I want to tell you that God's got a plan for your life. No matter what's happened, if you look to Him, He will open and close doors. He'll bring people into your life. And today's not the end. It's the beginning. Give Him a chance. The Old Testament writer says, today is the day of the Lord. Let us be glad and rejoice in it.